When it comes to stamping, mixed media is a perfect match because we don't have rules, we're just mixing and matching both colors and textures and all kinds of fun stuff. So stamping is a natural extension, and in this lesson I'm going to create this cute little tag and show you a couple of my favorite ways that I like to combine stamping, color mediums, and textures. To start off with, on my tag, it has a thin coat of dry gesso over it. Now it is very important that the gesso be completely dry. If you try to do the next step before the gesso is completely dry, this is what you can look forward to. This is my whoopsie. I was trying to rush things, it didn't work. It will not work if you try to rush this. So let it dry, make sure it's completely dry before you move on. And I'm gonna be working with these stamps from Waffle Flower. They are just so cute. And usually if you wanna use archival ink, you can, but I like to add more texture, and to add more texture, I like to get into embossing. Now you could use white, you could use clear, or in this case, I'm gonna use black, and I'm gonna start with some embossing ink all over my stamp. And then I'm going to press my stamp onto my tag. And it might stick a little, that's okay. Then I'm going to get my black embossing powder out. Just sprinkle it gently over and then gently tap off the excess. I like to go onto a piece of paper or a paper towel, whatever is handy, and you just want to give it a gentle tap. Now, if there are some stubborn areas, you can take a dry paintbrush and just brush away any spare powder that you don't want to have on your image. Once you are satisfied with it, you'll put your powder back in, and we'll need to heat set this. Now, if you've never done heat embossing before, you will know it is set when everything turns glossy and shiny. You will see a very definite change in it. It will go from powder to set. You can see how quickly this changes. Look at that, there it goes. Once everything is shiny, you want to stop using the heat tool. And it really does not need any time to set or anything. We can get right into the creating. The first creating that I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the background, and I'm going to do this with an assortment of distress crayons. And what I like to do is really get a lot of color here. I really want to build a really rich background, and we don't need to worry about if anything is going to be too much color, if it's too bold. You don't need to worry about that. And the reason you don't need to worry about that is because we're going to do a couple of things here with this that are going to make it so that it's going to work no matter what. The really only thing is we need this fully coated. Now, you don't actually have to directly color all of it. You can then use your finger and blend a little bit. You can also use just a very little bit of water if it's really dry. Like I was having a little bit of, it's very warm and dry in here, so it's drying really quickly. And remember, we're only doing the background right now, but you can do that to kind of move things around. If you'd prefer, you could try with a paintbrush to move it around. I find that the paintbrush picks up too much. Do you see how there's some white streaks in there? I like the paintbrush for going into these little detailed areas where I want there to be the background color, but I don't find it works well for overall. I find that it removes just a little too much color. If you do remove too much color, just come back in with the distress crayon and add it back in. Remember, we want lots and lots and lots of color here. I know that seems a little bit crazy at first, but you're gonna see why, because look how all those blues and purples and everything, they just blend together so nicely. Just gonna go through and make sure there's no real big lumps of distress in here, any lumps of crayon. Get those out, but everything's really well covered, because the next thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna get out our stamp block. We're gonna remove the stamp we were working with, and I'm gonna put the other stamp on here as a really fun background stamp, and we're gonna stamp with water. So to stamp with water, this is a very fine misting sprayer, so it works really well. Just do it off in a direction. Make sure you get just a little bit of water. You don't need a lot. When you look at it, if you can see little droplets of water, you're probably good. And then I'm going to stamp and lift. Now, it's not going to be a super neat stamp. You're not going to see really crisp image here. that's okay. You can also repeat a couple times, but if you repeat without washing off the stamp, I want you to notice how some of the color sticks onto here and tries to come back. So if you really want to do repeated stamping, you're going to want fresh water on there so that the color does not transfer, so that more of the color comes off. And you can see that's why I wanted a really thick coating of distress crayon on my background, so that I could use water to stamp into it and create that beautiful look. And this only worked because of my gesso base. It would not work on paper as well that had not been coated with something, because that coating is what keeps it so that the colors will mix and blend. And just look how much fun that background is. Now, the other thing we can do is we can use water. Distress crayons are a lot of fun to play with. And if we just add a little bit of water, and then instead of blending it, let those droplets dry, add a little heat if you want to speed things along. What that water is going to do is it's going to create little tiny bleached out type spots. And it's just so much fun to do. You could just I could keep going and going and going to keep getting more little spots. Now I do want to make sure if there's any areas here that we're not liking the results, or there's just a little too much, you can brush them off. For the main image, you can use any color mediums you like, any of the things that we've used so far. I'm going to get out some Prima watercolors here, and I'm going to use my water brush, put a little bit of water into the brown, and I'm going to start on the bear. Now don't worry about, because of the style this is, you might notice he's got some brown. I've gotten some brown into his eyes. I've gotten some brown everywhere. Don't worry about this, because we can and we will blend things and change things and correct any mistakes. That's another benefit to have starting on the treated base, is that if you have some mistakes or some things that you wish you had done a little bit differently, it's really, really easy to come in with something else, say a paper towel, and look, I can blot almost all of it off if I need to, or if I have a spot where it just didn't turn out the way I had hoped. In addition to watercolors, we could add any of the other types of color that you've been seeing so far in this class, or other colors. If you have other color mediums, you're welcome to use those as well. You can also, if you want, blend either directly in the palette, or you could blend outside if you wanted. If I want to do some colors down here, remember with the water brush, you'll want to rinse it out. You want to make sure it stays clean. You'd also work, of course, with a standard paintbrush and dip it into water if you prefer that. For the flowers, we can color them in any possible way. I'm going to use some distress crayon here on my mat and then pick it up with the slightly damp paintbrush and play with that. But I'm also going to come into the watercolors and pull some of those colors as well to make and mix and match my own little colors here. You can continue coloring as much as you want, as little as you want. If you wanted big lumps of color somewhere, you could certainly throw some color on. If you want a big explosion of color, we can add some water here. We could get some watercolor. Notice how I'm putting the watercolor onto the mat. Sometimes I will do that when I want a lot of color, but I want it to be very weak like this, and then let my brush pick it up, and then I'm going to tap my brush, and what that's going to do is send little flicks of color all around, and they will interact with other color mediums that are in there. You will see some reactions. You're going to see some pretty funky stuff that can happen mixing and matching those colors, but that's the fun of it. And working on a project like this where we're looking at color mediums and we're just kind of mixing and matching and playing on a stamp tag, we don't have the pressures of what if it messes up? What if it doesn't turn out just so? You don't have to worry about those things because we're just having some fun here on this tag. And this is also, again, a very forgiving piece. This is a piece where we can, if we make a mistake, we can always come back in. We can come back in with a lot of water or anything else that we've got or that we need to redo the color. Just remember, if you're redoing color, you're going to want to really do it in a way that is going to not create like a big muddy mess. For example, with all of this color on here, if I was to try to redo this color, or say I put some green on his ear, I would want to work on removing color. I wouldn't want to work on trying to replace or cover up. My focus would be color removal. And that's something to remember because sometimes that's actually what's needed versus trying to just keep working over and overworking a project. And you can see here, this is still wet, so it's going to take a little time. Here is a finished one, and you can see even more clearly as it's dried the water spots in here. The stamping on this one has faded more than on the one we just made. Sometimes that happens. When it comes to this type of project, I really don't worry about that. And you can also see how the bear has changed. I've used different browns, so the bear looks a little different. If you wanted to, you can add, this is a great opportunity to add little embellishments, here I've got some little stars and some sequins, beads, all kinds of fun things. So this can be, once dry, a lot of fun to add little touches like my little Maggie Holmes gold hearts. So we can work on adding little embellishments and details. The mixed media adhesive here, this works pretty well to glue these little buttons and shiny things down. If you get a little whoopsie like that, don't worry about it because we can come in here and add a little button, and that'll cover right up a little star, maybe a little bead. It won't need much, but it's a lot of fun to add a few little dimensional touches to a tag like this to kind of bring it all together. And as it dries, as I said before, you can see already as it dries, it will change, it'll lighten. If you want to use your paper towel to dab off or a heat tool to speed things along, you can certainly do that as well. This particular stamp has some sentiments. You could add some little sentiment strips, as I have here. There are just a lot of fun ways to combine stamping, water, color mediums, whatever you may have to create so many different types of projects. And I hope that I've inspired you here in this lesson to try maybe a few little different things with your stamping. Maybe mix it up a little bit, maybe some water, maybe even stamp with some paint.